Whether you're making images or videos, whatever it might be, you're in the right place. The Visual Lounge is about to begin live. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're watching from. So glad that you're here. Today is a pre-recorded session because I'm traveling for some work, but we wanted to bring back an old episode, one that you may not have heard. This is with Jesse Lahey, and he talks about remote communication and using visuals. We think it's super valuable for everything that's going on, continuing to go on in the world. So let's go ahead and dive in and listen to this episode from last year. The need for remote communication has grown exponentially, right? Like if you weren't a remote worker before, you might be now. If you weren't thinking about how to communicate remotely before, well, of course you have to in many more ways than we ever have before. So it's essential that we figure this out. And our guest today is going to help us to think through some of the things. We're going to be talking to him. He's got a lot of experience and a lot of expertise in this area. And so we're going to dive into our show today. So with that, let me do our introductions here. Jesse Lahey is a consultant, speaker, and author with over 25 years of experience in leadership and workforce communication. See, I told you he's perfect for this. He served as an HR communication leader at a Fortune 500 manufacturer with nearly 20,000 employees worldwide. He's had some experience with remote communication, I'm guessing. Since 2004, he has been a co-founder and strategic partner of Workforce Communication, a team of consultants helping organizations enhance the performance and well-being of their people. He hosts a podcast, Engaging Leader, downloaded millions of times by leaders around the world since 2012. With that said, we'd like to welcome Jesse Lahey to the Visual Lounge. Hey, Jesse, welcome.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for inviting me to join you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. You know, it's interesting. I get the chance to introduce a lot of people, but it only ever says about this much about you. Why don't you go ahead and take a second, introduce yourself to us for our audience sake.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say I'm very excited to be here. I've been using TechSmith products for about 20 years now. It was like right around 2000 or 2001 when this guy that I worked with that I admired a lot did something really cool. And I said, how did you do that? And he showed me this thing called Snagit.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So really pumped about the chance to connect with you and your audience today. My story is I've worked several years at large management consulting firms, and then a few years as an HR communication leader at a global company. And then I founded a boutique consulting firm that focuses on workforce communication. And my personal passion is the intersection of business savvy, creativity, and especially communication, and applying that like virtuous trifecta to help improve a company, both in terms of their business results and their people, their well-being, their growth, their happiness. And I get geeky about the power of communication to do good in the world. As you mentioned, our company is called Workforce Communication at workforcecommunication.com. And we're a team of strategists and creatives using the power of communication to help CEOs and other leaders improve the performance and well-being of their people. So we help with the communication strategy, that's both like on-site and remote. And we offer creative services like graphic design and writing and digital production to bring those strategies to life.
Well, that's awesome. And I have to ask, so I was thinking as you're going through and talking about this experience you had, did the health pandemic throw you guys for a loop too in terms of communication? Did it make it challenging, or were you guys like, we've been prepared, we've been building our whole life for this moment?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yes and no. It was both and. Yes, it was more of the same stuff that we've been doing on an increasing basis. And our team is virtual, so that helped that our team is spread around the country. We've already been working internally, remotely with each other, but it was challenging, the sheer need that we had at clients that weren't yet operating that way, but also really nice because suddenly things that we'd been telling clients and advising them, like, the world is changing, you're going to need to do things more this way. All of a sudden, boom, we were there. So the need to connect with people better, especially remotely, is greater than ever.
Yeah, I would imagine it took everything you probably been working for and put it on a rocket ship and just kind of like, yeah, those things we've been saying that were going to happen for years. Well, now here they are. Because I know we feel that way. Like we've been talking about, and I know I've got a couple of people who have said this before on the show, like, oh, it's the year of the video. Well, it's been the year of the video since 2016, but 2020 kind of felt like, yeah, video's got it's here. We're all going to be on video now. So I think it's awesome to hear that, like, to see those things come to fruition. But I'm guessing there's a lot of folks in our audience or who will eventually listen to this or hear this that they're still struggling with the need to figure out how to communicate better now that they're maybe not in the office, and still who knows when we'll go back in the office, right? Like that's maybe never. But I'd like to have our conversation. I want to talk about how can we help people to start getting better at this process of communicating now that we're not, able to sit with each other all the time, or we're not, kind of physically present.
Yeah, I think it starts with an intentionality, and that really starts with the idea of strategy. And communication strategy simply means ordered planning. Strategy is the process of clear thinking in a particular order to make plans to accomplish a specific outcome. I think that's the best place to start. And I love how Fred Garcia, who's a communication professor at NYU, he kind of simplifies this strategic process. And he says, you need to have clarity about the situation as it presents itself, the goal that you're trying to accomplish, and the means by which you're going to accomplish that goal.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking from this intentionality standpoint, I mean, that makes so much sense, right? Like that's kind of basic. It seems so basic, but I wonder if you're uncertain. Let's say you're in a business and you're kind of uncertain, like, oh gosh, am I being intentional? How do you start moving in that direction so that you can make sure your communications are more intentional? Because I'm thinking we probably do it a lot more than we think, but it's more intuitive or less of a I'm not thinking about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, one of the challenges as a leader is, or any kind of communicator, is we've been communicating our whole life. And so we think we're really good at it. Maybe we actually think we're better than we are. So we're sort of like the Old West gunslinger we just want to shoot from the hip. And you actually need to take time to aim, know what your target is, and be a little bit plan a little bit ahead. And otherwise, we have this natural tendency to sort of skip the planning process and jump right into the tactics. Well, we had this problem came up. Let's hurry up, make a video and solve it. Let's fire off an email, tell people this problem is happening. Let's tell them don't do that. And just like, shooting a gun from the hip, skipping the strategy means often missing opportunities to actually engage people well. And it also can create unintended negative consequences. For example, it's amazing how many times somebody fires off an email and they don't realize it, but it has mixed messages in it. And so where you'd like to have people get clarity on a topic, you've actually created confusion. Or maybe you're hoping to earn their trust on something, but you actually create mistrust. Maybe you're hoping to nudge people towards some helpful behaviors, and you actually can create inertia, apathy, or maybe even active resistance.
Wow. I'm checking the boxes as you go through. It's like, oh, I've done that. Oh, I've done that. So it's a laundry list of things we shouldn't do. I'm curious, Jesse, from your perspective, let's say, and I'm not asking for free consulting here, but I think it would be helpful if we talk through this a little bit. Let's say I'm that leader or that individual, and I'm going to start thinking more intentionally, and I'm trying to avoid the things that you just said. You mentioned we need to have a strategy here. So what might I do at this point if I'm thinking, okay, I need to communicate better, I need a strategy, that's what I'm hearing. How do I go about creating that strategy? Like, is there a process I could go through? Are there steps I can take that would help me to do that? And I could probably think of 1,000 different examples where I might want to do this, but we can talk higher level if that helps. Yeah,
the cheat sheet that I usually use, and it works for both big scope issues as well as just simple stuff, is a framework that we call the 5M framework. And where that comes from is the 3M, the company that makes Post-it notes and Scotch tape. Well, we decided we needed to go 2 better than 3M, so we made 5M.
Love it.
And they're sticky. We want to be even stickier with our communications. So the first M that you want to think about is, what is the mission that we're trying to accomplish with this? And by that I mean, what are the specific business outcomes that this communication needs to achieve? Now, last time on the Visual Lounge, you hosted a great session with Ajay Pangarkar about why you need to understand the business outcomes of your organization. And communicating with your workforce or your or training an audience is first and foremost a way to achieve your organization's overall purpose and specific business goals. So the first mission, what's our target? What specific business outcomes does this communication or training need to achieve? That's the first M. The second M is members. Who are our specific audiences or stakeholders? What do we know about them as individuals, as an organization? What's their culture? What's their history? What are the current dynamics as relates to this issue? So that's members. And then the third M is messages. What are the key things we want people to know, to believe, or to do? If there's an outcome that we're trying to accomplish, that means we're trying to get people to change a behavior, to do something, or to say something, or to believe something differently. So can we capture that in some key messages? And especially, can we do that what we would call the narrative, like the narrative for change? What's that story look like? So that's the third M. The fourth M is media. This is the one that most people just immediately jump to. So what are the communication channels? We need a video. We need a poster. We need an email. So what are the communication channels, the content? Also, who are the spokespeople that are going to best connect with your audience? How, and are those real life people in your company? Is it a character that you're going to create? Is it an example customer? Who are going to be the voices? And when you think about this media, how are you going to compete with things like social media and the rumor mill? Both have a lot of, just carry instant credibility and are very distracting to people. So just got to think about what media you choose. Ideally, you're going to do multiple ways. Just like, this broadcast that you're doing, we're putting it on multiple platforms, LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, and because everybody is not everywhere. And so we want to hit people at least 3 different places. That increases credibility if they hear it in 3 different places. And then the last M is manager or champion support. So the managers in your organization, they're key influencers. And how do we help them make this a success? Can we help them help us? And a lot of times we just forget about that altogether. But if we can think about those 5 M's, the mission, the members, the messages, the media, and the managers or other champions, whether it's a complex situation or simple, you may spend weeks on the planning process, but at least spend a few minutes in each of those areas, even for a simple communication, and you're a lot more likely to actually achieve your objective as opposed to being disappointed.
Yeah, no, first of all, credit to you. I think you're the first guest to reference another guest on the Visual Lounge, so that's fantastic. We appreciate that. And Ajay did have a lot of great business stuff that they added. But I love this because I think, first of all, you've obviously spent your time creating a message that is memorable, and it was worthwhile that I wrote it down on a sticky note. But I love this thinking, right? Because so my background is, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, is more in the training world, creating training. But these things apply, and I look over my career, and the trainings that I've created, the social media that I've created, the video, like I can see how these apply in all those places. And you said something I thought was really interesting, that most people jump to the media. And I'll be really honest, as a company that creates a media tool, or media tools really, with Snagit and Camtasia, guilty as charged, right? It's so easy to say, we're going to make a video. And while I think there's value in understanding that you can make a video, it's really interesting, these other pieces, because I think it's so, for instance, the fact that thinking about the stakeholders and, whether those are the external audience or internal audience or whoever it might be, really resonated with me. and then you're thinking about what that message is. So I think my point here being it's just it's so simple. Like this is not complex, but the way that you brought it to light, I feel like if you're listening to this right now and you don't have the 5 M's, it is members, messages, media, mission, members, messages, media, managers. Memorize that and start applying it to the things that you're doing. And so you mentioned that obviously this makes sense for big scale things, right? You've got a major announcement, a major thing you're going to do. Can we talk through maybe if it's a smaller thing, like how do you balance the time? Because I could feel like the downside might be that I spend time on the 5 M's that I never really get to sending the message. Is that something, a challenge you come across or have dealt with?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I like to say, if it's a really big scope, sure, companies will spend weeks creating the perfect strategy or as close to perfect as they can get. But if you can even spend 1 or 2 minutes in each of those areas. So for example, you admitted you're kind of quick to jump to the, let's make a video or whatever the media is. I tend to be quick to jump to the message. What are we going to say? And and that's fine. I mean, you want to think through that stuff in the right time, but just take one step back and again, it's that order is helpful. So just spend even a minute, like, okay, what are we trying to accomplish here? So even if it's just a minute, and especially if we can write down, reduce something to writing, adds a lot of clarity and simplification and avoids confusion. And then, you can share it with someone else on your team and say, hey, do we have the same goal here? Are we after the same? Because it's really surprising when how often people are not on the same page in preparing any kind of campaign or communication. And then that second part about just thinking about the audience and what's the culture, what are the issues that are affecting them. Those two things alone, if you just take a minute, get into the head of who we're actually communicating to. There's different tools. One of my favorite is an empathy map that is quick, and you can do it just by yourself or with a team. Just spend 15 minutes. It's basically, and you can people can Google it. There's lots of examples of an empathy map out there. But basically, you draw a picture of a person on a whiteboard, and you just say, who is this? The primary audience here? What do they look like? What do we know about them? And just add some Post-it notes on that. Here's things we know about that. Now, if it's a little bit more complicated, we do what's called a stakeholder analysis. And instead of just one audience, we want to make sure, are we thinking about all the audiences? Okay, so we know that we have, this group of hourly employees at this location that is going to be affected by this change. Who else is affected? Well, there's also their supervisors. There's the salaried employees at that location. Is that the only location, or are there others? Are there what language do they speak there? Are they English only, or are there other languages? Are their spouses going to be affected? And so we would, again, like on a whiteboard, just draw a circle and put one audience in a circle, and then we would draw a line and put another audience in a circle, and just think about them a little bit and who else is affected that we're not thinking of. Because when you point out, let's say, the salaried employees, it's going to jog your thinking. Oh yeah, but there's not just salaried employees. The IT people have their own complete agenda about this, and so we got to handle them a little bit carefully. And what about this type of employees? Let's say we're at a health system. Our physicians are very different types of employees than, let's say, the custodians, and so they think about things differently, and they might need a separate strategy. So again, it can be really quick. You could spend a minute if it's something simple. You could spend 15 minutes if it's a bit bigger or longer. But just taking a little bit of time in each of those 5 areas really sets you up a lot better for success.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you are still pulling in visuals with your empathy map and trying to kind of get. I would imagine that kind of sets the thinking, right? You're trying to envision who it is rather than just being like, I'm thinking about a person. It kind of forces you to say, like, no, these are real people that are going to be affected by whatever it is I'm communicating. It might be a good message, a bad message, a neutral message, but they're going to be impacted by receiving that message. So I really do love that. So Jesse, as you've been thinking through this communication stuff, we've got our 5 M's. We're starting to set up some strategy, kind of thinking about how we're going to communicate, planning it out. Let's say we've taken our time to do that. What do you recommend is kind of the next steps? We've listed out our 5 M's. We understand that we're ready to move forward. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, then it comes down to execution. Are we going to execute well on that strategy? And especially in this new world with remote communication being so important, we've got a short, simple model called the SVS that is helpful in terms of executing. It works for on-site as well as remote employees, but it is and other audiences like customers. But it's SVS is it stands for Simple Visual Stories, and they're very effective to increase increase how well whether it's videos or graphics or written materials, how well those connect with people and inspire trust and drive action. And so those 3 words, simple, visual, and story, each have some specific meaning that attach to themselves. And I can kind of break each of those down if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm just posting in the chat that we've got those. So simple visual stories. And I would love to know, what does that really mean for anyone that's trying to communicate?
So if we just start with the simple part, there's 3 things to keep in mind what we mean by simple. 1 is short, 2 is purposeful, and 3 is well crafted. So short, the shorter the better. All else being equal, a 90-second video will be viewed and remembered more than a 3-minute video. And ditto for an email with 3 paragraphs versus 20 paragraphs. Shorter the better, but I think it was maybe Einstein said, you want to make things as simple as possible and no simpler. So there is a point. You don't just do a 5-second video for the sake of it. But just how short can we get this and still accomplish our goal? It's going to end up being viewed and remembered a lot more consistently. And then the second thing is purposeful. So we talked a bit, about business outcomes, and that first M was mission. So this is where we apply the mission. Be, purposeful. Be very clear about what outcomes we're seeking, who are our target audiences, what actions do we want people to take, what feelings and beliefs do you want to stimulate. So if I had to take, purposeful and break it down to 3 things, what actions, what feelings, and what beliefs are we hoping this is going to prompt in our audience? And then the third for simple is well crafted. So just, are you going to do a good job with it? Words matter, the specific words, and the right messages. What they do is they trigger worldviews and they prompt reactions. So if we can use, crisp words, if we can use well crafted in general, and then design matters. Anything visual, the right graphical construction will invite the brain to pay attention, and it's going to help people digest the information.
Yeah, so these are really good. And to your point about shorter, we talk a lot about on this program and other places around TechSmith the length of videos, right, that you brought up. And I've been saying this a lot this last month. It's as short as possible, but long as needed, right? 5 seconds, if that's all you needed. And we actually there's a really great example, Super Bowl ad. Reddit purchased a 5-second Super Bowl ad that was just a PNG image that if you're a TiVo user or whatever tool, you could pause and you could read these paragraphs, basically based on, if we're gonna kind of date ourselves here with the timing, but the things that have been happening in the stock market, Reddit users driving up. So interestingly enough, they said 5 seconds was enough, that because people would stop, pause, read it, and talk about that's all they could afford or whatever. And so it's interesting, 5 seconds, but for most of us, 5 seconds isn't enough. You can't explain anything in 5 seconds. But you also, if you can, they could do it in 5 seconds. They didn't need 20 minutes. They didn't have to spend, how much does a Super Bowl ad cost for, millions of dollars to get a 60-second spot or a 30-second spot. So I love that idea because it ties in so much with what we're doing. And then the well-crafted, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it doesn't mean it has to be the best quality. It just means it has to be good enough and it has to fit with whatever the message is versus, I don't have to go pay for Hollywood if I don't need Hollywood quality. Does that make sense?
That's right. Yeah. I liken it to, if you've ever heard, well, so I've been my whole career, I've focused on communication. And yet when I stand up to speak to an audience, I'm not a perfect speaker. Like I sometimes people will say, you use a little too many ums and uhs. And like, yes, I'm sure I could get better. But I basically, I prepare ahead enough and I practice enough so that it's I'm comfortable and it's natural and it can come from the heart. I'm probably never going to be that super slick communicator. At some point, it was good enough, and people trust what I'm saying. I have some credibility. They can hear my heart. They can understand what's in my head, and that's good enough. But it doesn't serve me well to get super slick, because then I'll just come across
well, I love that. It's who you are, right? And I think especially it seems like maybe the pandemic has softened us a little bit. That like a dog barks in the background, there's a kid, or you and ah a little bit. That seemed like, I remember probably 10 years ago, I would have told you, oh, that's bad. That's real. We don't got to really cut that out. And some cases you don't want it. Like, you're pre-recording something and it's supposed to be like a tutorial. You don't want to distract. But I think in many cases, it would feel almost absent. It's like if you ever walked into a room where there's no noise and it feels like, this is weird. Something's missing. There's just not the ambient sound. And if you didn't have an occasional or ah or processing thought kind of word, I first of all, I would be in trouble because that's how I talk all the time. Same thing. I speak a lot, and but again, I think it goes to your point that it's the heart and the mind, right? Like you're still able to feel that connection, and that I love that you're still able to understand clearly what's on your mind and what it is you're trying to convey. So that's a lot for just the first one, for simple.
Yeah, for simple. Yeah, short, purposeful, and well crafted. And I'm curious, Matt. Have you noticed anything in your data as far as the length of videos or podcasts, whether it affects how many people view it or listen to it?
Yeah, we have some research, not specifically about ours, and I can talk about our data a little bit, but we did some research, viewer preferences, and it was interesting in that data. Now, it's getting a little bit old, and 2020, of course, kind of skews everything. It was from the end of 2018, and we found that for instructional videos in particular, and informational videos, the preferred length of videos was between 4 and like 9 minutes. Now there's actually 2 columns there, but they were like both 26% of the people. So half of the people were saying they actually preferred longer videos when it was instructional or informational. And what I think that tells me is, one, I think for video in particular, it's becoming much more accepted as a medium, right? Like you're willing to commit more to video as a medium. But 2, people are really in it for the information. If you've ever watched a video that was short but it didn't tell you anything, it's just as frustrating as it is if it's too long and it didn't tell you anything. Maybe that's still a little bit more frustrating. But it's finding that balance, like, because some content, some information, going back to what we said earlier, you just can't convey fast enough. Like you can't, or if you were to go faster, it would actually be a disservice. So that's, I think, one piece. The other thing I'll say is with video in particular, and podcasts it's a little bit harder to know. If you watch my video, but you only watch 30 seconds of it, should I be devastated? It depends. Maybe if that entire thing had to be watched for context, understanding, then yeah, we've got a problem. But when it comes to the things that I focus on with learning content, if you watch 30 seconds of a video, what I don't know, and this is one of maybe the problematic areas with this type of communications, I don't know if that's what you needed or you just didn't get what you were finding that it wasn't for you. But what if it did solve your problem? Like I've done plenty of home repairs where I've had to look at something and it's like, oh, I don't need this. I'm already past that step. I just need to know, what do I do here? And I only watch that little piece of the video because that solves my problem. And in that case, I'm a consumer, but that creator should be very proud that they helped me. That's what I wanted. So I think there's a couple different ways to look at it, but I think obviously you're going to see more drop off the longer you get. if you got a 30-minute video, like our show today will be, 40 minutes, 45 minutes or something like that. People aren't going to stay. They're going to watch a 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minutes, and hopefully they stay and get more for the viewers that are watching. But so I think it affects differently. But relevance is key here. Is the message relevant throughout? Are you getting nuggets out of it and going? So I think it goes back to what you're saying about your strategy. What's our goal? What are the things that we're trying to plan for? But if I was telling you how to stay safe, I worked at a pharmaceutical company. So like what to do if there's an acid cloud. If you didn't watch that entire video and there's an acid cloud, bad. This is bad. But if if it's like, how do I route a letter and I understand how to route the letter and they didn't watch all of it, less consequential. Hey everybody, it's Matt. I just want to interject for a second and let you know that we've got actually new data from what I just talked about. In 2021, we ran our viewer preferences study again. We call it the video viewer study. And it's got updated information about preferred video length. And it did change a little bit, surprisingly. So you're going to want to go check that out. It's a free download. You can get all the great information. And it's got some great stuff about the features, functionality that people want to see in video or like to see in video. And let me tell you, a little hint here, the number one thing is clear audio. So go download that. It's completely free. And let me just say why I've got you here for a second. If you're looking for a way to create great visuals or video, check out TechSmith's products. Go download, snag it, Camtasia. We've got free trials of both. And then hopefully you find some value in them and you become a customer. We'd love to have you as part of our team because we've got great support materials, including the Visual Lounge. We've got our TechSmith Academy. We've got tons of tutorials, awesome, amazing webinars from our customer education team, all there available for free to help you get better at making images and videos to be able to communicate the message that you have to share. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, that makes good sense. I like I still keep going back to the as short as possible, but as long as it needs to be. It also reminds me of that Mark Twain quote, something like, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. Yep. And there is this point at which it's harder to get it shorter. I noticed, like with my podcast, Engaging Leader, which is a lot of them are interviews, and the shorter ones do get more downloads. And if I could work hard, if I wanted to invest the time up front and really craft, a great format or something, perhaps that would be helpful. But mostly I just have fun talking to people, and I don't really want to do a 5-minute conversation or 10-minute. I want to go ahead and, as long, usually they need to be 20 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever it needs to be, whatever is most enjoyable and gets the right, tips and so forth for the audience.
Well, I think we'll go down this rabbit hole a little bit because I'm thinking about I've been thinking about the structure of this show, right? And I think I'm probably over the next year we'll probably pare it back to be a little bit more concise. But here's the thing that when we look at our goals, if I go back to my sticky note here and the 5 M's, because I'm gonna apply what I'm learning today. As I think about my mission, it's to help people to be successful at creating visual content, learning about creating good, ultimately visual content. We haven't gotten there quite yet because that's the SV. The V is next, right? The visual piece. I think about the members, and they're gonna, we've got lots of different content we're providing. So someone's looking for how do I do this in Camtasia? We've got that covered elsewhere. But ultimately, when I put all these things together, I think about the exploratory conversations, the ways that we learn by the fact that we're having this conversation now versus maybe a very tightly scripted one, right? And I think that's hopefully our audience is finding this valuable, but I am. If anyone listening to this isn't finding it valuable, I apologize. But it's super valuable for me because I'm starting to see these connections between the things that we do. And I think through the there's room for exploratory conversations, to your point, right? We could have had a 5-minute conversation, describe the SVS model, right? And that could have been the entire video. We could have said, what are the 5 M's? And we will cut out pieces of this into smaller chunks to share on social media, and those might be included. But I think understanding and you can help me catch the vision here, maybe if there's something else I should be doing, but leaving space for communication to happen in a much more organic fashion. Yes, there's going to be the very strategic, I plan this, we are going to do this, this, and this, and that's the message, versus there's room, I feel like, for conversations or for videos to explore a little bit more. Now, with pre-created media like video, I think we have to be like if this was just a recording, maybe cut out the stuff that's not as great, or cut out the pieces that were too side tangential or whatever. But I think for a live show, which this is, this seems to be like, for me, it's at least a very valuable aspect of communication.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and part of what's happening is you're building a relationship with the audience. You're helping them, use your tools better, make their work lives and outcomes better. But you're also building a relationship with them and supporting their loyalty, if you will, with TechSmith, and kind of creating a community. So those are key outcomes.
Absolutely. Well, because I'm keeping an eye on the time because we do have a finite amount of time. Let's talk about, we started with the simple, the SVS. Let's talk about the visual. What goes into that category here?
Yeah, thank you. There are 3 aspects to visual to keep in mind. The first is metaphors, the second is images, and the third is characters. So metaphors stimulate paradigms in people's brains, and they set expectations. So what do we mean by metaphor? Well, we're talking about using an image or an analogy, or if it's a written or verbal communication, then you want to come up with a word picture. But you're doing something that associates with something that's already familiar to the audience. Our brains tend to be, let's call them lazy, and we tend to fall back on things that we're already familiar with. There's a sort of a mental inertia that goes on. And so if we can help people make a connection with something they're already familiar with, it speeds up the process of learning and adopting and agreeing with, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. it resonates with me. So an example would be, and I'll ask you to show this sample video. It's a 2-minute video. We could just show even the first 30 seconds, just to give you an example of an analogy that is telling the story.
Yeah. Any prep you want to set the scene for before I show it? Anything we need to know?
Sure. Yeah. This is a large company, global company. And like everybody else during COVID, mental wellness has become a big issue. Lots more stress affecting people. And so they have beefed up some of their mental wellness offerings and tools for employees, one of which is their employee assistance program. And so nowadays, you can not only by phone connect with an actual counselor, but you can do it by video. And it's a free service. And they found most companies, there's like only 5 or 10% of employees have been taking advantage of a resource like that. But it's super helpful. And so we needed to help people be aware of it, but also get okay with the idea of reaching out for assistance in the area of mental health, because it's there's a stigma attached to it, and I don't want people to think I'm weak or crazy or that I'm incompetent or they can't trust me anymore as an employee. So sort of normalizing it, like this is something we're all going through. And so we used this metaphor of being stuck, having to navigate through and escape from a jungle island, if you were shipwrecked on a jungle island.
All right, well, let's check it out right now.
We all experience it sometimes. Life gets complicated, and it feels like you've been shipwrecked on a jungle island filled with obstacles. You're alone, isolated. Things feel a bit scary because you don't have much control over the situation. Visibility is low, and you're not sure what type of challenge will be coming at you next. Everything feels uncertain, so you feel like you need to be ready for anything. Anyone can feel overwhelmed in this situation. Maybe you feel tired, restless, burned out, or hopeless. Maybe you feel irritable, and your relationships are suffering. You might have physical symptoms, like stomach troubles or headaches. But you're not alone on the jungle island. Owens Corning offers the Employee Assistance Program through Beacon Health. Feeling relief can be as easy as talking to someone. Through the EAP, you can talk, completely confidentially, to a professional counselor about relationship issues, substance abuse.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. And, I feel bad for the coconut because I thought it was going to get thrown and smashed. But I love it. It makes a lot of sense that metaphor, you're using something people can relate to that is, it's not the direct, like, oh, are you, because I've heard those messages, are you struggling at work or blah, blah, blah. And this way, at least it takes maybe some of that, like the stigma away, it feels like, or a little of the edge of like, oh my gosh, I can't deal with anything right now. But now you brought a little bit of color. You brought some things that kind of like instantly, oh, I get it. Yeah. I kind of feel like I'm on an island. I'm alone. I need help.
Yeah. And the other thing, so you got this, the main metaphor is being on an island and alone, but you're not alone. And then there's like a smaller symbol inside there, which is the coconut actually represents whatever the issue is. And sort of it's a subtler symbol in that you're not the problem. Like, you just have these issues, and everybody has issues. It doesn't mean there's a problem with you. And so if you can have a little bit of objectivity and see, okay, issues come and go. I just need a little bit of help to deal with this issue. I feel a lot more, have some confidence in myself and in the ability to take advantage of these resources, and like, okay, we're gonna get through this together. Might need some help though.
Yeah. So I love that the use metaphor, I think you said characters and then images, which that video does a great job with all those pieces, right? Like, because I can see myself, even though it was a stick figure, that was a great thing. Even though it was a stick figure, I could relate, someone could relate to that as, oh, that's me. Or the images, of course, there's the child care centipede or the other challenges coming across. So really, really great example. Okay, yeah. So we've got simple, we've got visual, and we got the second S, which is story, which I'm guessing right. We just saw some story in there too, right?
That's right, yeah. All right, so story has three components to keep in mind. One is connection, one is entertainment, and one is action. So the first thing is connection. And what I mean by connection is connecting with people's heads and with their hearts. A story makes something real. This is an issue affecting real people. It's not just an issue from management. So with that EAP video, it's kind of obvious there's real people that have these types of issues with childcare and so forth. So it's not just, it could have been a message from on high, hey, the bigwigs around here notice that only 5% of people are taking advantage of the EAP. Do you realize how much we spend on this EAP? Do you realize, we just go off, but we're saying that, looking at it from the aspect of real life people, and a story does that. And any story does that. It doesn't even have to be a great story, but a powerful story actually creates an emotional bond. So people are more likely to be willing to be open or even motivated to change. So like another example of that would be, we had a company that was, back there. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but used to be people could smoke at work and use tobacco products at work. And then, time started to change. And so there was a company that we were helping implement that. And in their particular environment, it was a big change. And it just didn't feel, anyway, people had some strong emotions about it. And then so you couldn't smoke at work anymore. And then also, it's not even very healthy to be smoking tobacco outside of work. So we really would just encourage you to be completely tobacco free. So that was obviously an evolution over time. And we used stories from people, from executives all the way down to frontline employees, who were willing to just share their own journeys of, used to use tobacco. This is what brought me to the point where I decided I wanted to make a change, and this is how I did it. The way it worked for me won't work for everybody, but this is what worked for me. And people opened up to that. Again, it's very different than just a company saying, hey, no more tobacco or else.
Yeah, I can imagine if a company did come down and say, we're paying a lot for this benefit, you better start taking that. That motivates no one, right? Like, that's actually probably going to push people to be like, well, geesh, that's not a great way to do this. So I love that. And I think, I've talked about story in a number of places, but I love that you said it doesn't have to be a great story. Obviously, there's better stories for better times and better outcomes. But I think just even using that way to connect with someone, right? We connect with people, we connect with ideas, we connect with those things. So I love that idea of using story to motivate. And I imagine that works across a lot of different messages. Are there times when like you'd be like, guess what? Story is not the way to go. Stay away from story. And any instances like that, or is you like story kind of always in the back pocket, ready to pull out?
Well, I would say there's always a narrative, even if it's not a specific. Typically, a story is going to have specific people doing specific things and having specific feelings. So, actual characters, actual plot. And you don't always have to have a specific character, but there needs to be a flow and a narrative that people can digest in a certain way that makes some emotional connections. And movie makers know this. So basically, it is easiest if you can just think though of what are specific people doing specific things, having specific feelings. Where it doesn't make sense is if you're going to spend 5 minutes telling a story that really was only worth a 30-second point. And sometimes it's just 5 words. This came up, and so I did that. And just you got to be cautious. I have definitely been known to lose my patience with someone telling a story, but because I'm not sure that it's like, what is the point? Get to the point a little quicker.
And he may have done that about 3 times during this interview. Let's.
I've probably been the one that should have cut my story a little bit quicker in this interview.
No, this has been all really good. We've covered a lot of ground, and I think I just want to say for our audience, so much good stuff here. If you can just take it and apply it to whatever you're doing, whether it's images or video or whatever your message is. But I'm guessing we've scratched the tip of the iceberg here, Jesse. How would one go about learning more about these concepts and ideas? If they found something here that they said, oh, that was really good, but they want to dig in some more, what would you recommend?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, some of the little buzzwords that I've thrown out there are not things I made up. So definitely feel free to Google things like the empathy map and stakeholder analysis and so forth. But a lot of them I've talked about on my podcast or on my website. So I have 2 websites. One is our company's website, and that is workforcecommunication.com. And again, we're a team of consultants and creatives. We serve mid-size and large employers, primarily helping people attract top talent, engage their employees, and then achieve business results. But even if you're not a mid-size or large employer, we put all that content on the website as well to share those models. So those are out there. And then my podcast is Engaging Leader, and that's my guest and I. We're sharing tips just like these to help people communicate and engage and lead. And you can listen to that at engagingleader.com, as well as on Apple Podcast and Spotify and nearly all other podcast apps.
All the places. So when they're looking up the Visual Lounge, go ahead and look up Engaging Leader and just subscribe to both. That makes it easy for both of us.
That's fantastic.
So Jesse, and we've got about 2 minutes, and I want to give you the kind of a chance for a final take here. What's your final last advice that you would give to the audience that are listening to or watching the Visual Lounge about communicating, whether it's remotely or just communication in general?
Yeah, I think it's to honor the power of communication, to recognize that we are always communicating, whether we're doing it. The question is, are we doing it intentionally or not? And that the people who are improving the world today, they're not just communicators, they're not just leaders, but they're actually engagers. They are thoughtfully thinking about how can we influence, how can we take advantage of this opportunity when we interact with people for good, and to meet, what's our mission? Just getting back to what's the mission? Am I making the most of that opportunity? And just being intentional with those moments of communication and influence. So that's where I would end on.
Now that is awesome, and thank you for all of your advice today. I do take notes usually during shows, but nothing like today. I've got multiple stickies. This has been really great. I've got some things to think about how I'm going to communicate better. But we want to thank Jesse Lahey. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for all your advice. And stay warm. You're in the upper part of Michigan, the lower peninsula, not the upper part of Michigan. But we know it's cold and snowy, so we hope you stay safe up there.
Yep. I saw a pretty good picture story yesterday. Someone showed a picture. The picture was a snowy road, and the tagline was, "Yep, we finally got all our potholes filled just like that." The roads are smooth now.
Oh, so pure Michigan. So pure Michigan.
Yes, that's my world.
Jesse, thank you so much once again. Everybody, go check out Jesse's website, workforcecommunication.com. Check out his podcast. Great information. This is the kind of stuff that if you think about the videos you're making, this applies to what you're doing, and it applies to the training, it applies to the documentation, it applies to the marketing content that you're making. If you're doing internal videos, it seems so foundational and fundamental, but why it seems so simple, these are the things that make the difference between good communications and difficult or not good communications. And if you apply these things, I know that as I'm going to, it's going to make your videos better. All right. We want to thank Jesse Lahey again for providing that great information. So many awesome little pieces of information, so many things that you can do and apply right away. So hopefully you've benefited from today's show. And of course, we always love to hear from you. If you like what you're hearing on the show, you got ideas, suggestions for guests, topics, things like that, please email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com, or you can always find us and tag us on social. Just tag @TechSmith. We're happy to do our best to accommodate here and make content that works for you. Now, speaking of making content, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, we hope that you'll spend a little time, whether you're making images or videos, or just trying to communicate better, take a little time to level up every single day. And with that, we'll see you next week.